We've been here for a good 400 years, yet we're still African American. If I go to Africa right now, they're like, you're not African. Go back to America. I'm American. I go to Africa, I'm American. I go anywhere else, I'm American. But in America, I have to have a special coined phrase added to my name. And I don't like it.
I don't really have a racial identity. I kind of wish I did, It gives you this nice little home to go to that I don't think I have at all. So, yeah, I don't know if anybody else relates that way.
I used to always put other, but then I don't even like that word. And so I guess now I put biracial or multiracial, and sometimes I say check multiple boxes.
Being white is also being looked at as the oppressor in a sense because you are the majority, and I don't like being identified with that, and that makes me really uncomfortable, but at the same time it's kind of true.
Sustained dialogue is unique because it creates a space on campus where you're bringing together students that otherwise wouldn't meet. If they would meet, they definitely wouldn't be talking about these issues. And it creates that space, that permission to let them focus on these issues and understand how they can change the way that they're interacting. Everybody's experiencing these issues, but so many times we don't feel like we can say anything about it or say something appropriate without putting our foot in our mouth. And so really the reason it works is it's creating a safe space in which you're consciously inviting people and giving people permission to talk about the issues that most people are thinking about, just aren't exactly sure where to dive in. The fact that it's also bringing the same people together time after time after time. I mean, when we say sustained dialogue, we really mean sustained.
I mean, it seems to me like a different form of racism. It's not like necessarily like...
It is so unique because it is students taking ownership over the problem of race relations and themselves trying to figure out how to do something about it. Sustained dialogue, I think, is a brilliant way of putting yourself more in touch with the conditions of other people, the conditions you might want to change, because it forces you to look inward at your own experiences and other people's experiences and think about how to relate those experiences. And once you can do that, and once you understand how people experience these kinds of challenges, I think you're in a much better position to change it.
It's the Chinese part of me. It's not something that I could ever change. People see me walking down the street and, they question, of course, what is she? Of course she's going to be Asian. She looks Asian, but, is she American? Is she an immigrant? Can she speak English? I mean, these are questions that go through people's heads when they see me. Whereas when people see you, you don't have to validate the fact that you're an American.
But I feel like if you start to define American culturally and saying it's a set of customs, foods, and things like that, then you're going to run into the problem of there are definite degrees of American.
Honestly, I don't believe that minorities are fully American. Those ideals of freedom and stuff are kind of what connect us. But still, sometimes I feel marginally American when I'm in the country.
The purpose of the dialogue is to push people to think about the causes of the problems, and many times they are rooted in relationship. If you're going to focus on relationship and transforming a relationship, anyone knows that doesn't happen in one meeting. In the 1970s, I was an American diplomat heavily involved in the Arab-Israeli peace process, and I learned the importance of a continuous political process to transform relationships. In the 1980s, that experience was deepened in dialogue among Soviet and American citizens at the depths of the Cold War. And what we learned was that relationships change if you bring people back together over and over again through a discernible pattern of evolution.
The first stage is to basically decide to engage. So students come together, usually one or two students say, we have a problem. There's a problem in this community that we don't have tools yet to be able to address. So they gather participants and they gather moderators and they decide to engage in dialogue. So then the second stage is basically storytelling. It's a time to share our experiences and often sort of dump. It's a lot of the emotion. It's the anger. It's the sadness. It's the laughter. It's sort of understanding how we affect one another in our community. And that's usually the longest stage. So moderators are trained to ask the right types of questions and sort of conduct the right types of activities so that these stories come out in a vulnerable way, in a powerful way, so that the relationships are built.
But an interesting question that comes up then is, how do other people perceive what it is to be American? And if we see different people saying different reasons for that, does that then account for why some people feel excluded as an American in mixed American culture?
I come from a biracial family, and my mother raised me in such a way that I would not feel the racism that she felt growing up. And starting to get involved in these groups, I then started to realize things about myself which I never had before. Each person needs to internalize it. And you can only do that if you build a setting where people trust each other and become comfortable enough to share the things that are deepest down. And there always has to be someone who's going to start.
It's crazy.
It's weird because I went to a family reunion recently, and like it was just, I felt really uncomfortable because there were a lot of white people there, and I was just kind of like confused. I was like, wait, is this my family? I guess one of the things that I had experienced when I first came to campus was, I guess, isolation sometimes, or I would go out to a different student organization and I would feel that I was being alienated in part because of my race. And I think that that was something that I hadn't really spoken about, and I wanted to bring it up in sustained dialogue, but I wasn't sure how other people would take that, and I didn't want other people to feel like I was accusing them of not being friendly. I eventually felt free to sort of say, well, when I first came to campus, I sat down at a lunchroom table and with, 7 other white females, and they all got up and left when I sat down. And for me to say that was, I think, a real breakthrough moment for me, because then I really realized the degree to which I trust in my sustained dialogue group.
I felt a little out of place, and I was a little alienated, and so I decided it for mostly selfish reasons, to go there and see if I couldn't feel like I fit in, and I felt this kind of bond with people who were of other races and other cultures who felt exactly the same way I did, but for, vastly different reasons.
One girl just came up to me, she's like, "What are you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Your ethnicity." And I was like, "Well, I'm Hispanic, among other things." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I love Mexican food." I was like, "Well, I'm not."
I was conscious of the fact that I was half and half, and that my Mexican side plays a huge part in my life. And then when I came to the university, I was very excited to express my Mexican side, I guess. And so I started to realize during the course of my first year that I had 2 different realms, 2 different bubbles that were my life in college. And it was very difficult for me to combine those 2 realms. And I felt like I really had to draw the line and maybe choose one over the other. That really started to bother me.
I've had to figure out what my identity is and where I want to, what I want to be part of, because I've never, it just happened naturally before, and now I feel like you have to make an effort, I guess, to be part of it.
And then the third stage is when the students start understanding each other's experiences, so that they basically analyzing what's happening in the community, and then in stage 4, deciding, okay, we as students in a community, how can we work as a group to start changing some of these aspects of our institution?
Because when you see a community where groups are already segregated, are you, how likely are you that you're going to reach out and be that, one Asian person in that, completely white sorority?
Let's be practical. What would make people more comfortable? What's a small thing we could do that would affect that?
I think making people aware that they're welcome is the first step, and that could be done through icebreakers and having people meet each other more, social gatherings, but maybe it's mandatory. Maybe you have, if you think of, the verb to talk, that is an action, so even by just sitting down and getting to know people, you're taking an action, so now you're learning about other people, and you're breaking down your stereotypes, and you're increasing tolerance, and that's action in itself. You don't necessarily have to form a boycott to be doing action.
Action comes from it. One project that my Sustained Dialogue group last year worked on was putting together a campus-wide panel on self-segregation. And it sort of came out of, we identified that as one of the main issues on campus that people talk about. And we just had students who had never really spoken about it out loud before have the opportunity to say something and hear from each other. So we got a lot of positive feedback.
I'm from Alabama. There's a lot of racial tension there still. And I didn't want to go to, some really conservative all-white college. I wanted to come to a place where people of all types and colors interacted, and I haven't found that to be the case here, and I want to change that.
Campuses do have a 4-year revolving door, so if you can change, one class, and 3 years down the line, freshmen come in and see a different way of interacting, they adapt those patterns. And so I think campuses do create sort of a unique space that other American communities don't, and the way that students understand what's happening and the way they engage with one another can change a lot quicker than it can in other spaces.
There's no way that this can happen and succeed if students are not running the process. If students don't shape the agenda, if they're not the ones who are asking each other hard questions, if they aren't the ones who are taking the decision to act. They have to be actively engaged in the process of changing. The other thing to say is, sure, we as students, it was our initiative that really pushed this, but my dialogues would not have gone as well as they had if it were not for administrators that were a part of the process.
We recognize as administrators that we can't really change student culture or change the locations of interaction between student groups, but we can foster and facilitate those conversations, and we can nurture programs like Sustained Dialogue that seem to be effective in bringing groups together.
We're sitting right now in the Sustained Dialogue Campus Network headquarters. And basically what we do in this office is serve as a catalyst to help students have the skills they need to start these dialogues and to create these spaces on campus. We go out to different campuses, we conduct moderator trainings, we conduct initiator trainings. We work with students to sort of get their mind around how can they take this specific process, this approach to addressing these relationships and make it a viable and thriving organization on their campus.
I feel very comfortable, and I feel very much like a proactive member of the community in terms of racial issues. And that's one thing that every person from every group that I've ever been involved in has said as well. I'm going forward from this group having a much deeper understanding of races, and I'm going to take that wherever I go for the rest of my life.
Sustained Dialogue gives you that tool, that tangible tool. Instead of just talking about it, well, why don't you just go and engage in conversation and see if you can change people's minds one by one and allow yourself to be changed at the same time.
The ways in which it's enriched my life over the last 7 years now, it's been amazing. This is the beginning of building a skill set that can be used almost anywhere.
Really what has sustained me over the next 2 years is the relationships I built with those people.
I feel like in terms of being a leader, not just on campus, but in life, Sustained Dialogue has equipped me with a backpack full of tools.